Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Friday. Hello, Ali. Hello, Tiff. Nice to see you again. Hello to everybody watching this on replay. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Emma Goode. I'm the founder of digital marketing agency 24 Fingers. Recently voted the UK's top marketing advisor by Enterprise Nation, and it's an absolute pleasure to be with you today. I'm joined by the amazing Ben Stanbury of the ID Bureau, and we're going to be
Hello.
sharing what makes a great brand today. So, a little bit of intros first, because I want to get to know you. And like I say, some of you might not know me. I started my business 10 years ago. Our name came from a very kind of strange set of circumstances, but I love my name, 24 Fingers. I have the good fortune of having a name that's easily remembered. And I moved to my area where I live in Essex about 10 years ago. And I went to the opening of an envelope. I went to everything. And it got to the stage where people would turn around and go, "Oh, 24 Fingers." And they're like, "Yeah, we know 24 Fingers." So we've got a fairly memorable name, I think, and it stood me in very good stead. And today Ben's going to be sharing what makes a great name, how we can make our name even greater, how it all ties in the brand. Ben also lives in Essex. He's got a much nicer accent than me, though. I've got a strong Essex accent. Ben is a father, proud father, a cyclist, a leader in the Beavers, and I also hear he is a creative writer and now a magazine publisher. So he's clearly a man of many talents. But today we're going to be picking his brains on brand. How to make yourself unforgettable. I think each of us, by our own admission, have got competitors. We each work in a crowded space. If you're working online, if you're selling your services, you're competing with many, many, many people at the moment. So Ben's going to be showing how we stand out and the kind of crucial element that the brand can help us. Is that a fair summary, Ben?
Yeah, well, that's very flattering. Thank you. Yes, absolutely.
Oh, amazing. So, for a little bit of housekeeping, do feel free to sit back and relax and take notes. I'm going to be sending this recording out probably, well, tomorrow if I can, and if not, Sunday. So sit back, get yourself something nice to drink. It's Friday. And I'm going to just kick off with some questions for Ben. So let me just open this up. If I was if I had better printer connection, these have all been on my desk already, but they're not there on my screen. So, Ben, I am going to start off with the question of what inspired you to work in brands? So, obviously, we've spoken about your creativity, we've spoken about the fact you're in magazine. I know that you also did graphic design. What is it about helping people develop their brand names that excites you and made you go into that direction when you could have done many?
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, as a trained graphic designer, when I was doing branding or rebranding for companies, I'd take them through sort of brand strategy workshops and ask them about their internal brand and what drives them and what motivates them to start their company. And when creating a brand identity, we'd always look at the competition and look at the sort of feelings that the brand identity they would want it to evoke. And it sort of struck me a few years ago that slap bang in between brand strategy and brand identity design, you have to have the brand name. And it's, I always say that an interesting brand name can lead to an interesting brand identity. Whereas, for example, especially in the case of professional service firms, if you're just naming your firm after four founders, it's completely forgettable and there's no sort of inspiration there. And there's certainly no brand differentiation there in terms of naming. And I like words. I write short stories and microfiction, and verbal identity and verbal language is such a big part of the brand. And I think that, that it really comes before the brand. Ideally, it will come before the brand identity. So that was, I ended up taking a couple of clients on in Canada and in the US who needed naming. And I just found the process absolutely fascinating. So, and I think it's quite an overlooked creative process as well.
Fascinating. There's lots coming out there, so I'm just going to kind of dissect it. You
Mm.
mentioned about having your name as a company name, and funny story. My son is a very, very, very talented web designer and developer, and his surname is Webstyle. He called his company Lewis Webster, and because he does websites, people think that that's like a pseudonym, and I'm like, no, that's his actual name. And I never thought about it until people kept saying it. Um, as a solopreneur, I think there is a trend to pick your own name. If you can't think of a name and you don't want to have something abstract, I think there is a tendency to go, oh, I know, I'm just going to call it my name. Is that a good or bad idea? So that was one question. And then second question, before I forget it, I have to say it to what about the founders that sit round a room and go, I don't know what our brand is, but I just like the name. Could you answer those two questions?
Yeah, so the first question is whether you should use your own name as your brand name. And I think the answer to that is it depends. I think if you are, say, um, being a coach or something like that, or perhaps if you're training in to be like a psychologist or something like that, there's a benefit to using your own personal name, because essentially, if you're working on your own and you're building up all of your brand and your IP around yourself, then I think there is a benefit to using your own name. Where I don't think it benefits is when you put five surnames together and you call your firm Smith, Johnson, Robertson and Jones, for example. I think that's
Well,
complete
but
lack of
you
memorability.
couldn't have put four more boring names out. Apologies if
Yeah, I did
anybody's
that on
called
purpose.
Smith and Jones. Yeah, if anyone's called
Uh,
Smith and Jones watching this,
yeah, no
I
offense.
didn't
Yeah.
mean that.
Um, so yeah, I think there
But
are.
that feels very accountancy, solicitors, doesn't it? Very kind of
Mhm.
corporate.
Well, in my previous creative role, I researched 500 accountancy firms in the UK and how they approach branding, and I found that 80% of them use founder-based names, and
Mm.
about 80% of them use blue and grey as their brand colours, and so there's no distinction. So when the outsider has to look at these firms, what they'll do is actually base their choice on price, and then it becomes a race to the bottom. So
Yeah,
because
no,
there's no brand distinction there. So I think
interesting.
it's worth noting that the name is the one element of your brand identity that has the most longevity, and it'll outlast sort of website refreshes and marketing campaigns and even rebrands. If you're refreshing your visual identity, the brand name will stay the same. Um, sorry, remind me, what was your second question again?
Um,
Oh, I
God, what
forgot it
did I
as well.
say? What did I say? I said about personal brand, and then I don't know, can't
Oh,
remember.
where
It's
people
hard though.
sitting around tables say we
Oh
don't
yeah,
know what our
yeah,
brand means, but we really, really
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
the name.
Thank you.
Well,
Yeah.
I think there is some sort of element of gut instinct that goes into branding and really into naming, sorry. And it has to be sort of pleasing to the ear and have good mouth feels, a good name, and it will be interesting, and it should be interesting. So if you do particularly like a word or you particularly like a name, it's always good if there is a bit of a backstory or something that you can sort of reverse engineer into that name. And a lot of it comes down to just how you choose to construct or approach a name as well. If you want something completely abstract, then you're going to be able to sort of build a brand into that and build meaning into that. But if you have a more suggestive name, you might want to go down the route, for example, with a suggestive name that sort of suggests a little bit about the product, but it isn't entirely descriptive. And an example of that would be, say, the lamp company Angle Poise.
Yeah.
And so they're suggestive, their name is suggestive in so much that it suggests that you can poise the angle of the lamp. So but that's something to do with approach and construct, which we'll come on to shortly.
I love it. I was very lucky with 24 Fingers.
Great name.
It does what it says on the tin. It helps people. We do things for people. Our arms around your shoulder. We support
Yeah.
people, and it's so easy from a kind of brand point of view to weave that in.
Mm,
So digits, bottom line, hand. There's so much in there. It's incredibly easy to create stories around it and weave it
absolutely.
into both like our visual identity and our actual words. So our logo, if anybody that hasn't seen it, is a fingerprint because in my team, I really try and empower people to get the best out of them, but equally only work on the things that they're uniquely great at. So I try so hard to put the right people in the right roles, because we're all uniquely different. I'm a Buddhist and I very much believe that we've all got our own unique potential. Um, I make sure that the uniqueness of the team member matches what they're best at work, and it all kind of fits in. We've got someone on called Ali actually, who's got a great brand name called Caribbeans. Yeah, Ali, was that instinctive? You just knew you was going to call it that? Obviously, goes into the target market. Tell us about your name.
Well, hi everybody. When Caribbean started in lockdown, and I was sat outside my friend's house when we couldn't mix together, and we didn't have a name, right? So I was thinking of, I wanted to make a play on the word Deliveroo. So I was going to call it Jamaica. I'm so glad I did it. And somebody said, "Oh, it's not all about Jamaica, right?" So we cook Caribbean meals for the community, and we have a concept called the canteen, and we're now moving into like residencies, pop-ups. So when I was thinking about the Caribbean, and I shortened it, and then we came up with Caribbeans, and we're just about to trademark it, which is great. And I think it just covers, people just know what we do, even though it's descriptive, but it's not. One thing I wanted to be really clear about, I'm just going to show you my logo. Let me come off video, you'll see it. So that's normally a circle. When I was thinking about Caribbeans and I was talking to some people, people take logos really literally. So I didn't want to have Caribbean flags and, eating and that kind of thing. I just wanted something that was just bold, and it's people recognize it now, and it's really easy when I say, "Hi, I'm Ali, founder of Caribbeans," they remember that. So yeah, it was done on a front doorstep, and come up with it. That was
The rest is history.
That's a great name, and it's short and succinct, and memorable as well as you're finding. So it's well chosen.
Thank you, Ben.
You're welcome.
Ben, obviously there's a success story in what Ali's said, and we've all sat there and go, Caribbeans, I know exactly what she does, says it all. What mistakes do people make when they're picking a name? Is there some names that just kind of fall flat and then they end up rebranding anyway? What's the pitfalls that we all need to avoid?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've actually got when I help companies come up with names, I use like a naming criteria checklist, which we sort of go through in the same order. And I don't know if you can share that on your screen currently, Emma.
You can segue me very nicely into the
Yeah.
screen there. Give me 2 seconds. Shout me if you can't see this, everybody. Everyone got this all right?
I'm not seeing it yet. There we go. Yeah. So what we're seeing here is the sort of qualities of that we look for when we're creating a brand name. And I would say the first mistake that you may make is that you have a brand name that's neither memorable, simple, or unique. And brand names need to be short enough to be memorable. And if you can really try and imbibe some sort of meaning about what your company, what you want your company to be understood for in your name, then that's a really good idea. So one of the first questions that I'll go through with clients is, what territories shall we explore when we brainstorm and try and long list names for your business, and what is it that you want to be understood for? And I think that if you don't go through a creative process when you're naming, and you just, again, I know I keep referring back to it, but if you just settle on something like your surnames, it's very hard to sort of understand what your business might be about from just your surname. And unless, Emma, like your son, you have your business built into your name, which is always convenient.
Yeah, weird. It's weird. It's weird.
But yeah, I think memorability and simplicity are really important factors. And in this checklist, you actually go through in this order when you're long listing and short listing names. And it would be fair to say that you can't have a name that will score sort of 3 out of 3 on every single one, but you should aim for names that score sort of highly across the board. And then right at the end, your sort of final hurdle is what I call the technical qualities, and it's looking at domain names, availability, looking at social media handle options, and then what you really need to do is ideally present a list of, say, 5 shortlisted names to trademark lawyers who will then go through a trademark process with you, and they will probably advise you, like on a traffic light system of like red, amber, and green, of what names to perhaps don't pursue, or what names you may be able to pursue if it's in a different category than someone with the same name. And then a green would be, yeah, we're fairly confident that you can just go ahead and proceed with the name. So, Ali, you must be going through that process at the moment with Carry Beats then.
Yeah, we've done an initial check and everything seems to be okay and
Uh-huh.
too many problems. But I think one thing we've got to think about is maybe future work that we may be doing. So it's not
Mhm.
a straightforward process, but we're on our way there, yeah.
And I think it's also important that when you're developing a name is to not pigeonhole yourself as well. Which so unless you're adamant that you're only going to make widgets for your whole life and you don't want to diversify that product offering, for example, then you may want to call yourself something like the Widget Company and be completely known for your niche, which is where a very descriptive and real word name is can be a good choice. But for other companies, you may not. You've got to just be aware whether your name is going to really, really pigeonhole yourself. So, an example I use in that is the company Fast Signs. And when they started many years ago, they did signs, but now you'll find in their marketing literature that they have to have a descriptor that says we do more than signs, and they'll actually Fast Signs will apparently create websites for you and content media, social media management, and things like that. But the name doesn't suggest that, and it's what I would call a limiting name or a pigeonholed name.
Ben, you mentioned the word gut feel a few times, and I do lots of things in my life on gut feel. Gut feels always served me quite well. And the minute I heard 24 Fingers, I didn't actually like it. Through a different set of circumstances, I kept it, um, and I love it. I absolutely love it, and it feels right. And I've got a few other business ventures, and every single name inherently feels right. What's the connection between kind of emotional resonance and brand naming conventions?
I
If
think for
that's
the
not too if that's not too woo-woo.
No, I think from the person on the receiving end of the brand name, then if you take some consideration to craft a brand name, especially one that is suggestive of some of the things you want your company to be understood for, then there will be like a resonance to it. I mean, and it's a really broad question, but you take a product like Dove, okay, the soap. So Doves are soft and white. Most of them are white, and it's there's a lot of imagery that surrounds like the name Dove, and so they've obviously chosen that name, for a reason. And so I think it's understanding a lot about verbal imagery and what that can suggest or suggest of the traits of your company comes into play. In terms of gut feel as the one naming your own business, well, I would say that there is a process when it comes to naming, and we go through a construct and approach chart, and we go through these 12 qualities that we just seen. But with anything creative, you'll often shortlist names, and you'll just let that idea sit with you for a while, and you may develop on that idea when you're not trying to be particularly creative at that moment. So you may be going for a walk, you may be driving, or lots of people have their best ideas in the shower,
I was just
etc.,
about to say
etc.
it's a shower
Yeah.
moment.
Definitely. So, although I probably shouldn't admit this, when I named my current company the Identity Bureau, I didn't take myself through a strict and rigorous naming criteria to come with that. I actually did it on gut feel,
Yeah.
and what not many people do know is that I actually had a different name for the company that was very descriptive, and I thought, and it used alliteration. It was the Name and Logo Co, and I thought that was, the one I'm going to call it the Name and Logo Co, because that's what I was doing. It was names and then logos, broadly. And I asked a friend of mine what they thought, and they said, no, it just sounds cheap. And so because I was so close to it, and when I sort of sat back and thought about it, I said it does actually sound a bit cheap, as though because these things do cost more than a few £100 to do, and I didn't then want to attract sort of the wrong type of client. And so over some days, I came up with the Identity Bureau, which I thought encompassed more of what I wanted to do. It didn't pigeonhole me, and it sounds more upmarket in my opinion. And I had some amazing feedback, even from well-known namers have said, we love the name. And I thought, well, that's a good first step, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Again, you segued me very nice into my next question.
Mhm.
You've got a business idea. Potentially, you've come out of full-time employment, or you want to do a side hustle, and you've got this idea and this passion kind of whirring around your head. You think your name's great.
Mhm.
You want it to be great. How do you test it? Do you talk to your mum and your dad who are going to tell you it's wonderful because they love you? Or do you go out to the public and get comments from people that you don't even know? What's the best way of benchmarking and researching the effectiveness of the name that you adore?
The way to do that is actually not to ask for other people's opinions early on because they're not party to the briefing process. I would always suggest that you actually write a naming brief, and which I have an ebook on my website, which is a pocket guide to brand naming, which includes questions about how to write a naming brief. And you will end up coming up with a name through name ideation that feels right, and if it feels right to you, and if it is also sort of suggestive of some of the traits and the qualities that you want your business to be understood for, then that's going to be the name to choose. And again, there's going to be some gut instinct on there, but using this chart with using the criteria checklist that we had up on screen, each one of those elements is like really important. And so again, if you are choosing a name that scores fairly well across the board, then you're on the right track. What I think is really important is just to not go and put it out on a public forum and not put it out to vote for people that don't understand the sort of inner brand and the nuances that you want your brand to be understood for. So as tempting as it is.
Got it. And again, on that, with the advent of digital marketing, social media, we spend our
Mhm.
lives on our phone. Suddenly, we've got access to people, especially after the pandemic, that we would never have access to. We can reach thousands of people at the touch of the button, both for good reasons and less good reasons. How has that changed naming? My perception, could be wrong, but my perception is when there is more budget and things took longer and cost more in the 80s, my background's publishing, and we had kind of longer lead times. We couldn't just do something within seconds like we can now. Things had a process we followed. Things had a budget. Things had a bit more of a perceived value. I should imagine logo design, visual identity design, naming would have cost much more, would have took much longer, but you'd have really gone through like an in-depth process, just like your PR strategy or your logo design, etc. How does that change things when everyone's a designer? We've got Canva, anyone can chuck some words, thing on Canva and then create a social media account, and within a minute you've got a business. How's that changed things?
Well, I think I'd say that everyone has access to design tools, but it doesn't actually make them a designer, as it doesn't make them, a professional namer or things like that. The companies that want to invest in their brand, especially where there's more noise now and there's, multiple channels, multiple platforms, there's a lot of brands out there competing. And I think you'll find that the companies that invest in their brand will shine through. And this is really where brand distinction is more important than brand differentiation, because if you try to differentiate your brand, so let's say you're an electric car maker and you create an electric car that does 1,000 miles, and it's the only electric car on the market that does 1,000 miles on a single charge. That's your point of differentiation for your brand, but it's temporary, because when all of the competition then catch up and they create cars that do 1,000 miles or 2,000 miles on a charge, then you've lost your point of differentiation. However, if you can create brand salience and memorability in your brand through investing in your brand identity and investing in your brand name, and having professionals sort of do that with you, and then that's where you create the memorability. And so brand distinction is ongoing, whereas brand differentiation can be just a temporary thing. So that's where I think that these things still cost money, and they do take time if you want them done properly. So that's a sort of a roundabout answer.
No. Super interesting. And we've got lots of time for questions, so we'll open that up more to the floor. Talking about social media, obviously with influencers, your personal brand needs to be hugely strong now. It's not enough just to have a company name. So I often get asked this question, why does my LinkedIn profile grow quicker than my company page? And the way that the algorithms work now is they want people to own a personal profile, and the better personal brands are people that post consistently, that have a very strong identity as them as a person.
Yeah.
Does that beg the question, why even bother having a company name if personal brand is so strongly recognised now? I'm playing devil's advocate.
Yeah, that's a good question. No, I think again, if you're selling yourself as a person, then your personal brand is really, really important. And, the way you speak and act, and making yourself like relatable to the people that you're trying to attract. And I think it comes down to what you do as a business, whether you're a one-man company. But if you're a brand such as a car brand or a shoe manufacturer, you're going to be appealing to a much, much wider demographic, and they're going to want to understand something about your brand values. And again, it's the product that will sell itself, especially technology, electric cars, watches, and things like that. People are buying the product, and they're quite passionate about what makes that product distinctive and different. So I think there's always going to be a place for branding for firms, but and that branding and that brand identity does, in the reverse way, extend into individuals. Hence, you have David Beckham and all of his sponsorship deals, and you have companies that will sponsor individuals who have like a big personal platform in order to sell their products. But I think, in my opinion, that the brand still matters.
Amazing, thank you. You mentioned the lovely David Beckham. You mentioned some car manufacturers. You mentioned Dove. Are there any brands that have done an amazing job, and conversely, any brands that have got a name that is just absolutely fallen on its feet, whether that be culturally it's wrong, or connotations is wrong? I remember years ago I was working for I think they were like management consultants, but they were called ISIS. And then obviously ISIS happened, and they had to rebrand very, very, very quickly. Tell us some success stories. Tell us some kind of horror stories.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. So, there are a few horror stories. I'm trying to think of any off the top of my head, but so car manufacturers, again, they have fallen foul of translation. So when you're naming a product that has to work across various countries, this is where you need to go for in-depth and paid for cultural checks. And there are specialists that will just do cultural check across lots of different continents for your name. So there's been car brands that have fallen foul, and some of them are sort of urban legends, and they sort of never happened. But I think one of them was the Vauxhall Nova, and which is you'll be familiar with that car in the UK. It's a bit old school now, but it was my first car. But in some European countries, I think it might have been in Spain, that translates as no go. And so they had to sort of address that. What else? There was like a Ford Pinto, I think, had some rather detrimental connotations in some Spanish-speaking countries. I'm not going to go into the full description of that one right now. But yeah, there has been a few, and it's generally when they don't work in other countries. But ISIS is a familiar. I've heard that story before. It's a familiar one, and exactly, there's nothing wrong with their product, and they delivered it well. But unfortunately, politics, had to dictate that they had a change of name. So,
and obviously, you work with a lot of people at all stages of their branding journey. Where do you get your inspiration from?
I like words, and there's something about helping a passionate business owner who wants to launch a business. And so a great example was a client of mine, Alex Pietrasiak, who lives in Phoenix in the US, and he has got an accountancy firm that we named Kinline. And he came to me and he said, I just don't want to look like every other accountancy firm. I don't want to call myself Trasiuk and Co, etc., etc. And I worked with Alex, and we really got under the skin of what his business was about. And his late father was an accountant and installed a really strong work ethic in Alex. And Alex really liked the word kin and the idea of kin and being related and next of kin. And so we went through a lot of different names, but we ended up with Kinline. And he's been, really enthusiastic about that since, and grew his business unbelievable in 3 years as well off the back of it. And he does
Amazing.
attribute some of that to having a distinctive brand.
Well, he obviously feels very connected to it, and when you feel
He
connected
does.
to it, you're going to work. Sorry, I'll do
Bless
that for
you.
my friend.
Bless
When you feel connected to something, you're going to work so much hard. Like
Yeah.
I don't know, you've got such more vested interest. Like, I love my name, I love my logo, I love my web design. I work with a brilliant agency called Fresh01 that did mine 10 years ago. And we met last week, and I was like, is it time for a brand refresh? No, I love what you did, and I'm never keeping it. It actually does need to be
Excellent.
tweaked in some ways, but it just feels so me, and it feels like something I can just continue to work with day in, day out.
Sure.
So let me, Ben, unless you've got any kind of burning things and burning points that you want to share, shall we open this up to any questions?
Yeah, sure. I've also got the approach and construct matrix, which I thought I might just run through to show people this
Yeah.
is something you can do really early on. If you could, would you be able to share that on the screen again, please, Emma?
Is that the checklist?
It's underneath the checklist on the same document.
Oh, perfect. Give me 1 minute. I'm trying not to sneeze again now. That's it. Yay. Brilliant. Everyone said okay?
Yeah.
Cool.
So before you start your naming ideation and developing long lists of names, which would then go down to a shortlist, you may just have a think about how you wish to approach and construct your name. And this is a fairly commonly used matrix in naming agencies. I'll just to give Rob his dues. This matrix came out of a book called Brand Naming by Rob Mayerson, which is an excellent resource for anyone who may be wishing to brand name their company. So it works on two axes. So you've got the approach axis, which is abstract names, suggestive names, and descriptive. And then along the construct, you've got real world, compound, and coined. So if we start in the bottom left, we've got threaded wheat is a very descriptive name that says exactly what the product is in the box, and it uses real words, shredded and wheat. Up one, you've got Naked Wines. So Naked Wines is more of a suggestive name, and it's just perhaps suggesting to the buyer that their wines may be free of some chemicals, maybe a more organic manufacturing process. But again, they're real words. Naked and wines is real words. And at the top, we've got Slack. And Slack is a productivity software. But in terms of the product, Slack is a really abstract name for what the product is. It doesn't suggest what it might be in any way, shape, or form, but it uses real words. In the middle column here, you've got under construct, we've got compound names, which is where you take two words and you join them together to create a new word. And this is slightly different from made up names because you're joining two real words together. So Facebook, it is fairly descriptive in some respects, and it's a compound of the words face and book. Angle poise is a compound of the word angle and poise, and again, but that's more of a suggested name that you wouldn't necessarily know what it is, but it's not entirely abstract. Whereas Magimix is a mixture of the words magic and mix for food processors, and I think that is a little more abstract. When you think of what the product is, you wouldn't necessarily be able to guess. The same with angle poise, I guess, as well, but I think Magimix is a little bit more abstract. And then in the last column, coined names or completely made up names. So Swatch is a coined name of Swiss and watch to create a new name. But it's also fairly descriptive as well. Google is a name that was taken from a much longer word, and I can't remember what it is, but it means an extremely high number. And given the number of search results that Google returns to you, that's where they came up with that name. And my favourite name, which I'm sure you'll all be familiar with, is Hagen Dazs, which is a completely made up name and completely abstract. And the thing I love about the name Hagen Dazs, the ice cream brand, is that that name actually has no meaning whatsoever. And I believe they might actually be an American company, and they wanted to create a name that sounded upmarket and sounded exotic, and so they came up with Hagen Dazs and put two little umlauts or whatever they are over the letter A. I'm sure they're not umlauts. And I think it was
No,
actually
they are.
they
They are.
are right. And I think there's a bit of a stroke of marketing genius, and they became, one of the world's leading ice cream manufacturers, and it's synonymous with sort of high-end luxury ice cream. But I just love the fact that it means absolutely nothing whatsoever, and that is a great example of how you can push meaning into your brand name when you want to.
I love that. And I think we're all going to now go out to the supermarket and buy a tub of Haagen-Dazs for Friday
Yeah,
night. I know I
I think
am
that's a
anyway.
great idea.
Great name, great idea. Ben, that was really interesting, fascinating, and I hope that's given everyone food for thought. Let me open up the room now to any questions. If anybody is considering branding their business or maybe has already thought of a name, wants to sense check it. Does anybody have any questions they want to ask Ben? His brain is free for you to thunder. Feel free to take yourself off mute or pop your info in chat. Go for it, Ali.
Yeah, so as you know, I've got Caribbean, that's great. But for me, my surname is Kakandi. So I'm trying to build my personal brand,
Mhm.
which is about coaching. I've got a podcast, just helping women to, step into their power. What would your advice be around? So Kakandi means nothing to most people in the world, but it's a very unique name. So the
Yes.
I've gone with Miss Kakandi. But yeah, what are your thoughts around, say, coaches and people offering services like that around personal development, coming up with using my name or coming up with a completely different identity?
Well, I think, as you say, Kakandi's quite a different and striking name. So, in your situation, I would definitely capitalise on that, and especially with given the sort of nature of the topics you'll be discussing, I don't think that's a bad choice. Would be sort of my immediate answer. I think if you had a very, very sort of run-of-the-mill surname, you'd struggle to create any sort of brand distinction. But I think that is an interesting name, and that would 100% lend itself to the development of an interesting brand identity as well. So I would say go for it.
Yeah. The other thing, just to add, so with the Haagen Dazs, is it Haagen Dazs or Argan? I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Haagen
oh,
Dazs.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that it means nothing, right?
Mm,
I was thinking about the offers that I'm gonna um Caribbean is my charitable work. I don't think I'm going to be a millionaire through that. Maybe, who knows, right? But where I want to make money is through my personal brand.
hmm
And I was thinking about one of my offers would be the Kakandi method, which doesn't mean anything, but
hmm
my method will mean something. I don't know what I'm trying to ask in that it's just helpful that somebody's got a made up name and now loads of us buy that ice cream. So it's just made me think about, right, I can create the Kakandi method, even
Yeah.
though it doesn't exist before, right?
Yeah, definitely. And you can even think about naming like your product offerings if they're coming into tiers of bronze, silver, and gold, for example, on your pricing strategies for your different offerings. You can think about how to excuse me, how to name those in a way that sort of links in with your name as well. It will take some thought, but I think, as you say, your surname is. It sounds interesting and it's distinctive. So that would, even on my sort of checklist of the first things you should consider with a name, you're already ticking some of those boxes strongly. So I always say go for it.
Thank you. I might slide into your DMs in LinkedIn and tell you where I'm at with it.
Yeah, go for it. And
Do it,
actually,
Ali.
I would say that I have a free naming guide on my website, which is it's about 16 pages, and it has both the matrix in there and the checklist that we had a look at, and it has a whole load of questions to ask yourself to create a naming brief. So it's free, just in exchange for joining my newsletter. So if you go to the idbureau.com, you'll find it under resources. So please grab a copy if you'd find that useful.
Thank you. Thanks for the workshops, been really helpful.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for coming.
Any other questions? Dan, did you have your hand up before?
No, I didn't have my hand up. I didn't.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were going like that.
No, I was agreeing. I was going, oh, that's a.
You were nodding. You were nodding.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I was just going to say, one of the mistakes that often people make, excuse me, is when they're choosing a name is to go and look for domain names first. And I advise all my clients to just don't even go looking for domain names until the very, very end, because it will restrict your creativity. You should just ideate, create long lists of names. And when you're making long lists, there's no bad name ideas, and just write things that come to mind. You can use dictionaries, etymological dictionaries, song lyrics, place names, thesauruses, and just take a deep dive into some of the sort of concepts that you want your brand to be understood for, and go and sort of seek out names from there to get your inspiration. But only when you've shortlisted your names and you're down to sort of the final 5 that you really love, all of them, only then should you go and start looking for a domain name, because nearly all one word or all one word.com domain names are taken. And unless you've got quite a unique and strong brand name, you're going to struggle to get the .com. But there are what is called top level domains now. So you can have .biz, .agency, .accountant if you're an accountant, for example. There's many, many hundreds of top level domain names which will allow you to be creative when you come to choosing a domain name.
Brilliant. Any other questions for Ben before we let him get back to naming and publishing and writing and daddying, cycling? So I'm going to send out this replay with Ben's details. I really urge you to have a chat with him, because clearly he's a font of all knowledge when it comes to brand names, and I've learned so much today. Ben, thank you so much for your time.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for the individual kind of advice as well for us. It really makes a difference when we can ask specific questions. So thank you, everybody. My next event it's next week. It's called 7 Ways to Get More Leads. I'm going to pop in the link into chat. If anybody needs to get more leads this year in your business, this would be a great event for you to come along to. Like all my stuff, it's very plain English, no tech jargon, very practical. So you're going to get lots of tips on how to fill your pipeline. One of the things I hear a lot from people is that they're not quite sure where their next lead's coming from. And this event is really going to help you get more eyeballs on your products and services and fill that pipeline for 2025, even in times of, what do you call it, what's the word, Ben? Cost of living crisis and this kind of thing. Even in difficult times, you can get leads into your business. So I'm going to be sharing 7 ways to do that without techno mumbo jumbo and without spending an absolute fortune on Google Ads. So that should be in chat for you now. I'm going to send out the replay and I'll send out all of the detail, Ben's details. But like I said, enjoys their Haagen-Dazs this evening and has a lovely weekend. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Bye.